Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, we've got a new guest here. His name is Ernest Jones. Ernest is the Technical Operations Director at the Audacy stations in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's a little bit new to engineering, not real new, but he feels young compared to the rest of us. So Ernest Jones is going to tell us about his experience with IT and RF and amateur radio and how he got interested in broadcast engineering, plus a few key kind of secrets that they're doing there at his station. So what's important to him? That's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb from the top of the tower. Thanks to Charles Kinney for that light bulb at the top of the tower. Charles Kinney from Atlanta made sure that got into my car and into my hands. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech, and I'm in the Nashville studio as usual. Here in Nashville, Tennessee. We're well past the ice storm. Thank goodness. That was a couple weeks ago, and where we were without power for 11 days here. And we did a couple shows about that topic. But now, it's been a beautiful day. It was 71 degrees a couple days ago here in Nashville. A little chillier today, but the weather has really improved. I know it'll get cold again, but there you go. I'm delighted to be here. I'm in the Max Connect studio here. For a few weeks, it was the Angry Audio studio. I thought I'd put Max Connect up there. A lot of you may have heard that I now have a working relationship with the folks at Max Connect, and I'm just delighted to be working with them. We'll talk more about that on a future show, but I'll see you at NAB, and if you're there, check me out. I'll be in the Max Connect booth. Actually, check them out. I'll just shake your hand and say hi. All right, it's time to get to our guest. We have a guest who I have just met, and I saw a video of his on Facebook, and I thought, I like this guy. He's good at explaining stuff. Let's get him on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Ernest Jones from Atlanta, Georgia. Ernest, welcome in. It's good to see you.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Hey, now, are you in a virtual room, or is that actual studio gear behind you?
Yeah, that's some studio gear. I'm actually at my house right now. So my house is a little bare. I just moved down here about 2 months ago. So still trying to get everything, but figured I would, put a little feng shui in the background and make it look nice for the time being.
All right. Well, you and I got to talk before the show just a bit. Why don't you give us the little elevator talk about who is Ernest Jones and why in the world did you elect to get into radio broadcast engineering?
Well, I've been in radio since 2000, so about 26 years or so, since I was 16, kind of the story of a lot of broadcast engineers, started on air doing board op work, and then went to college, went for electronics, because I was like, well, I liked how it worked a little bit more than being on air. And I got to college, went for electronics, and then started DJing as well. And some people at JMH 102 Jams in Greensboro started to get attention from doing, nightclubs and parties and private events. And next thing you know, I got invited to do on air, and I did on air mix show for almost 15 years before moving over into engineering, because I have a electronics degree. So, it kind of all worked out, but it was very fun doing on air mix show. Then also kind of getting in the background and starting to do a little bit on the engineering side as well.
So when you got interested in engineering, did you have a few maybe early successes that maybe encouraged you to say, hey, maybe I can do this engineering thing. My brain kind of works around this stuff.
Well, at the first radio station I ever worked at, their old computer died, and I was into computers at the time. So I said, well, let me rebuild your automation. And that's what I did. I rebuilt their automation system. I couldn't have been no more than maybe 17 years old when I did it. And I think they used that automation for at least over 10 or 11 years before they replaced it.
Wow. So when you say rebuilt automation, this was the computer that ran the automation program, right?
Yeah. They were using an old DOS program. I don't know where they got it from, but the computer just died one day, and I said, "Well, let's upgrade it to, I think Windows 98 was the hot thing," and got them. I think it was it was a very rudimentary. It was Zara. That's what it was. It was Zara radio. It was very early Zara. That's what they ran for a very long time.
Now, we're going to take our first commercial break here in a second, but I'll throw in. I'm way older than you are, and the first automation that we ever used, all it did was automate a overnight satellite show, and it would play the top of the hour ID, and that's all it did, based on a contact closure. But I made it. It was a Commodore 64. Now, have you ever heard of a Commodore 64?
Yes,
that's way before your time.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Man, that is cool.
I interfaced I don't know if it was the printer port or some kind of GPIO port, and wrote a little program that would receive the closure, and then I forget what all it did. It wasn't much, but anyway. Hey, Ernest Jones is our guest here on This Week in Radio Tech. We got a lot to talk about, including his start with IT in the banking industry, and then how that kind of led him into the broadcasting industry. He's engineered at several stations in North Carolina, and then most recently moved to market number 7 in Atlanta, Georgia. So we'll talk to Ernest coming up. We'll see what he likes and doesn't like, and kind of where he thinks he's going from here. I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech, and we're brought to you in part by our friends at AIR, AIIR, air.com. Let's check it out.
Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of AIR. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with AIR.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month. All you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through AIR?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming. And from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
So it's easy to get started with streaming from AIR. Tell you what, they do a couple other things too, like scheduling, music scheduling online. That means you can do it from anywhere, and you don't have to depend on a given, particular computer where all your stuff is. They also do the Playout One automation system, as he talked about, streaming made simple, and there's a content management system, a CMS, website CMS built for radio. Also, listener interaction and tools to help you with your production, including Alexa apps too. So check it out, all from AIR, AIIR.com. And if you're coming to NAB in April, I'm going to be right next door to the AIR booth. So look forward to seeing Dave Brierly-Jones and Ricky Lee, and you, if you'll stop by either the Max Connect booth or the AIR booth, because they're right next to each other. All right. We're doing This Week in Radio Tech. It's episode 787. And with us is Ernest Jones, also known as, what's your DJ name, Ernest?
DJ Ern is what folks called me on that's what I went by for many, many years. And every now and then I still pick up the turntables and, do a little wiki every now and then, still like to mix up the tunes.
I know next to nothing about being a music DJ, like for parties and dances and weddings and things like that. But I've got several friends who are really good at it. And they all have another, maybe a full-time job, some other thing they're interested in. One guy that I know in Mississippi, he runs a food truck, and he's really good at it. So he does food truck and the whole DJ thing. I know another guy who's a DJ who's also a broadcast engineer. when were you really into doing the DJ thing, and then how did that lead you, if that's what it did, into an IT career?
Well, with the DJing, I was I was at the radio station, just doing my regular mix show things and everything else, and then I would start hanging out at the programming meetings, and I started talking DXing with our PD or ops manager, because he was an avid DXer, and that's when we figured out that I had a connection on the engineering side, and I like tech, and I like doing all this other stuff. And then so it became well, why don't you shadow the chief? When you go out, when we have projects, and then, as time went on, it became a little bit more responsibilities, a little bit more. Then a position opened up, and then I ended up as the IT manager over at Audacy Greensboro back in 2022.
Okay. Okay. That's been what, 14 years? No, 24 years ago.
2022. Yeah.
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 Oh my goodness. Okay. So the IT manager at Audacy in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah. That's what I was doing up until 3 months ago, when I became the DTO here in Atlanta, also for Audacy.
Well, now it's interesting. You had this interest in DXing, and tell me about that, because that I don't know, maybe it's more popular than I thought. I used to, when I was a kid, I would tune around the AM dial and pull in, Dallas, Texas, or Chicago, or New York City, or sometimes Denver, Colorado. But that kind of passed away when I got just so busy with my regular engineering career. What was your interest in DXing?
Well, I like listening to distant AMs. A lot of times it was, it became, well, what can I pull out of the static? So what I do now, and especially if I'm alone, because if I have friends in the car, it drives them crazy. But I'll park on a channel. I'll park on a channel and just listen and just see what comes up out of the noise. And sometimes just, it kind of passes the time where you're driving, because you're just driving. And it's just, especially on these long drives now, going back and forth from North Carolina, just finding a channel and just listening, and you never know what'll even pop up, even on a graveyard frequency. You just pray it happens at the top of the hour so you can get an idea, or whether it's just a random song or a random blurb of a piece of programming. You're like, well, I don't know what that is. And then, then you go down a rabbit hole when you get home trying to figure out what station that you heard. And but yeah, between AMDX, FMDX, Tropo, and eSkip openings, I still remember maybe 10 years ago, one morning, I picked up one of my stations in Greensboro, V103, WVEE, and I listened to it for about solid 3 hours one morning in Greensboro. And I was like, this has never happened before. But I was kind of mystified even then, and I would never known back then that now I'm the DTO of the same station. So.
Okay. Do you ever DX FM, during periods of skip?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I've gotten a lot of great eSkip openings all over the country, and even some of our stations. I'll sit in the parking lot and just listen, or the thing about eSkip or even AM skip is you don't need a fancy radio or a bunch of high end gear. You can usually use whatever you got, and a lot of times the car radio is the best piece of DX gear most of us have.
Yeah. Hopefully the car radio is away from wall wart power supplies in your home. You're out on the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe a little bit less noisy of a receiving environment.
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad you actually, by saying about the long drive, I used to drive from central Kentucky, like Richmond, Kentucky area, to Paducah, Kentucky every week. A good 3.5, almost 4 hour drive every week to stay in Paducah to do some engineering for some stations there early in my contract engineering days. And you know what? I would typically listen a lot to WLS out of Chicago on that long drive. And I, got to really like some of the disc jockeys and some of the talk shows. Never could deal with the hockey. I just didn't care for the hockey coverage when some station would play that. And then, thank you for mentioning this, as I kind of forgot about this. When I lived in Memphis, driving back from a station back to my home in Memphis, I would often listen to WLW in Cincinnati. And of course, Gary Burbank, the late afternoon disc jockey there. back in this would have been in the throughout the 80s.
Okay.
Did you ever listen for content, or you were always listening for what can I dig out of the noise and how far away is it?
A lot of times it was what can I dig out, but if the content stuck out, it stood out. It made me listen a little longer. Especially if it was good programming, and that's the worst when you have a station and the programming gets good, and you're well outside of their coverage area, and then it fades, and then you're just like, oh no.
Yeah,
well, I don't know what they were gonna. I don't know what was gonna happen next. It's just you just wait. I never know. And before the days of streaming,
yes, exactly.
You're just stuck.
We didn't. Yeah. So, yeah, that happened on WLS a lot. They had sometimes there'd be a disc jockey on, but sometimes maybe it's on Sunday nights. Of all things, they had a lady who was doing sex advice, and it was a little bit racy for the AM dial. She kept it clean, but you knew what they were talking about, and sometimes it would fade out. Oh, I wanted to hear that. So. Oh my goodness! So this love of DX. Well, now you used some words there about the different types of propagation that one might get the idea that you're also an amateur radio operator.
Yes, I am. My call sign is KY4SZ. I'm amateur extra. A license back in 2018 off of a whim from a good friend of mine named Clay Walker, and me and him went and tested on the same day. And what's funny is he'd probably kill me for saying this, but he failed the test. I passed, and then I came back, got my general, and then eventually got my extra.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Did Clay has his license as well too. Now,
okay.
He is licensed as well. He eventually got it, but he is licensed. But yeah, give me for that one, but it's fine.
Well, we all have a story. I got my license when I lived in Mississippi. And then after moving to Nashville, I ended up spending some time with Leo Laporte at the TWiRT network in California. And while I was there, I took the general class test. That's as high as I got. And the proctor for the test, oh golly, I can't. Who's the guy that wrote a bunch of books available at Radio Shack back in the day? Not Forrest Mims. It was a different fellow who wrote. Our audience, I'm sure, knows, and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember. Anyway, his wife was the proctor for my general class test, so that was kind of an honor. Yeah, was it Gordon? Somebody? I don't remember now. All right, so were you all into amateur radio at the same time you were really getting into? Yeah, you worked at Audacy in Greensboro. So that was
So I was doing the amateur radio thing, and that opened up a whole nother side of DX, which is radio DX is fun, but with amateur radio, when you're DXing, the person can talk back to you versus you just hearing a station and it's just a one-way street. So it was very cool being able to do that, and sometimes I would just pop the radio on late at night. And I still, one of the craziest things that's ever happened is one night I was chatting with an amateur out of Arizona. It was around midnight Eastern time. And all of a sudden, 3 guys from South Africa chimed in out of nowhere. And I was just like, this is crazy. And this was the first time I heard South Africa on the air. And I mean, they sounded like they were locals, and but it was just riding that gray line DX where the sun was coming up there. And, sunset for, actually it was well past sunset for Arizona, but it was basically riding that gray line because it was about 7 a.m. their time. But yeah, they were in for a good amount of time. We just all had a nice long chat. Then at one point, a guy from Chile heard us and he chimed in as well. I just, this is different, so, but it's very cool. Very cool. I like I said, I love the DX and I love the chase, and, down here, like I said, I've been here 3 months. So hopefully I have my amateur gear set up very soon.
Now, I'm a little curious now. When I was in my early teens, I built a Heathkit shortwave radio. And so for a while I was into shortwave listening. And I remember the first station I ever picked up, and here I am probably in, I don't know, 5th grade. and we strung up an antenna inside the attic of our house and hooked the ground up to a cold water pipe and in this old house. And the first station I heard was HCJB out of Quito, Ecuador, and that had quite an impression on me. Now I didn't. Other than that, I tuned in some number stations and other things that made a lot of noise. But I guess I kind of lost interest once I had done it. I kind of lost interest, but obviously your interest has maintained. When thinking about learning RF in broadcasting, did you learn RF in amateur radio first, or how did that order take it go?
It kind of went side by side. Now that I think about it, I was kind of doing a little bit of. I was shadowing at that time when I was doing my amateur radio stuff, but yeah, it kind of went side by side, but the amateur radio definitely taught me how to do things at the low level before going to, high power level. And then, in 2022, moving over to the IT manager. Now, even though it was IT manager role, I was the backfill for our chief. So, I explicitly told him, I said, hey, I want to learn RF. I want to learn how the transmitter sites work. And I want to learn how do we get it from the studio to the transmitter, from the transmitter all the way up to the tower and out the air. So, he taught me a lot. Larry Allen is the DTO over in Greensboro, and he's taught me a lot about RF, especially I think within the first week he had me changing tubes in a Continental 816, which was very interesting. So, I learned on tube rigs first before going over to solid state. Even in 2022.
It's a lot of mechanical work to change tubes in almost any tube transmitter, but boy, that.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm thinking about if you're in IT, that's a whole digital world. Do you have any, do you have any interest in digital amateur communication modes?
Yeah. I did FT8 for a very long time. I was doing slow scan TV. There is a meme that I used to send out. Well, actually, my friends made it a meme where I fell asleep in a hotel room in the lobby, and they took a picture of it, and somehow or another it got approved on Google Photos. So I was the official picture of this hotel, and I used to send this picture out over slow scan TV. As my CQ call sign. Like CQ, and it was me sitting in a chair in the lobby of a hotel room.
Oh my gosh.
So I did slow scan TV for a while, and FT8. I tried FT4. I did what's the other one? Oh my gosh, what's the other one? Not C4 FM, but the DMR. I've done a little bit of DMR as well. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I like the digital modes on the amateur side as well. I haven't done them a lot lately. Once I kind of opened up on HF a little bit and got a decent antenna, I started going more voice than digital. But every now and then I would, just get on and do some FT8 or FT4. And
I got a lot of
fun at it there.
I got a lot of enjoyment out of Echolink, or maybe there's two standards, for just using, 2 meter 440 repeaters and hooking them up to other repeaters around the world. So you could be driving around Nashville and talk to somebody in Australia.
Yeah. I've done Echolink as well. And I still have the app on my phone. I haven't used it in a while, but yeah, I still have the Echolink app, and, I really need to start utilizing my Echolink and DMR stuff. It's kind of just gathering dust.
All right. We are talking to Ernest Jones. Ernest is now the director of technical operations for Audacy in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're having a good conversation. One of Ernest's real passions, though, is audio processing and audio routing and pathing. What all's in the audio path from the mic or the automation system or whatever's playing the audio out to the transmitter site, and how's it going to sound when the listener hits it? We're going to be talking about that in a few minutes. Our show this week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics. They got something pretty cool at Broadcast Bionics that we haven't talked about before. We're going to talk about it right now if you'll watch this video with me.
Caller One is the talk show system that anyone can use and everyone can afford. Live radio thrives on listener engagement, and phone calls play a crucial role by bringing real-time interaction, authenticity, and a true sense of community. But with the rising costs of traditional phone lines, broadcasters need to migrate to SIP. But this has been complex and expensive until now. Caller One makes your move to SIP easy, enabling you to save on line rental and improve call quality, while at the same time integrating seamlessly with your existing hardware and workflows. With Caller One's intuitive browser interface, you can answer, screen, and route calls to air from any device anywhere on the network, eliminating the need for expensive, dedicated hardware. And it integrates seamlessly with the IP or analog console you already have. It's quick and easy to add notes and flags to callers. And with its built-in database, you can view call history and previous call notes all on one screen. As well as smooth call handling, Caller One records an isolated feed of the caller and presenter for every call, allowing rapid editing and repurposing of content for trails, podcasts, or social media. Flexible licensing allows you to choose 3, 6, or 12 lines, which can even be shared with a second studio. Make the switch to SIP with Caller One for a subscription that is less than the price of the daily coffee run. Get started today at bionics.co.uk/caller1.
That's a great place to get information about Caller One. bionics.co.uk/caller1. And so many dealers, broadcast equipment dealers, can provide you with Caller One. And you know what? I'm a big fan of SIP telephony. I am. Of course, you kind of don't have a choice anymore. You know, you need to be a fan of SIP telephony because all the other lines have been going away for years and not being maintained very well at all. So thanks a lot to Dan McQuillan and his whole team at Broadcast Bionics for providing Caller One, a really cool way to put callers on the air. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack at This Week in Radio Tech, episode 787. And our guest this week is my new friend, Ernest Jones from Atlanta, Georgia. Ernest, you said you've just lived in Atlanta for a couple of months now. Man, that is a big city to move into. Are you getting comfortable?
Oh my goodness. Yes. It is a stark difference from Greensboro, where 20 minutes equal 20 miles, where 20 miles, could be 2 hours here. You just don't know what's going to happen when you hop on the highway. So it is that the traffic is something that a lot of people say, you never get used to, but it's the trade-off for living here. So,
some people would go to work earlier and earlier, and it gets to where you're going to work at 4 a.m. and it's still crowded.
Right. And I've experienced that. I'm like, let me go in early today. Nope, it is still all right. There's one accident. All right, we're driving on the shoulder here, and all right, we're gonna make it an hour later.
Oh my gosh. All right. So we're going to talk about audio processing. You have a particular passion for audio processing. Give me an overview of what you think about audio processing in general, and what you like to hear from something that is processed. What makes your brain happy? What makes the music or voice have a better impact with you, maybe even emotionally, when you hear something that's well processed?
Well, I like the audio to be good, clean, but also when it needs to hit, it needs to hit and do what it needs to do. I remember when I first started DJing, I used to take a basic, single band compressor limiter out, with me to gigs, and I would plug it in front of the PA gear. And a lot of, owners and sound techs looked at me kind of funny, says, "You take your own processor?" I was like, "Yeah." So I don't want to blow anything up. That was the one reason, but also to level my audio out so that it would be clean and consistent. And that's something I kind of took over into radio, and that's what I look for when on air. I look for clean, not really hearing a lot of distortion, and just making sure that we have a good product from beginning to end, because, even though we're passionate about audio processing, to the average listener, it could be the difference between, well, it doesn't sound right, I'm a tune away. So that's what I kind of look for in processing.
You said something there that is really smart. People talk about a signature sound, and okay, that's fine if you know what you're doing and you can make a as people tune in, they say, "Oh yeah, that's whatever your call letters are. That's WKXY. That's my station." Because maybe it sounds a little bit different than others. As you say, it's a good phrase. It hits different. My friend Frank Foti would say, "How does it print on the radio?" And it kind of makes you think about the process of newspaper printing, but something how does it look on the radio? How does it feel? How does it sound? Obviously, but the important thing you said there was you don't want to drive anybody away. You don't want the audio to have any bad habits. So tell me about the things, Ernest, that you listen for that would be considered bad. You mentioned distortion already. Are there other things that make a station annoying in your ears?
Sometimes high frequency enhancement, I think, can drive people away, especially women. So I kind of look for, if I hear a station with a lot of high HF enhancement or a lot of low frequency enhancement, especially with urban music, I can see that kind of driving people away. From being a club DJ for so many years. I like bass. But at the same time, it has to be balanced and really hit when it's supposed to, but also be able to pull back when it needs to as well.
I guess sometimes you hear audio that's over processed and it has no breathing room. It's a wall of sound. What is that? How is that negative for people's ears or psyche?
Well, I think the term that I read was called listener fatigue. And it's kind of where your ears just are. It sometimes when I used to hear it in live sound all the time. Like it's so loud for so long that your ears just get tired, and next thing you know, and subconsciously, it's just like, well, I'm just tired of listening to music. I'm just tired of the noise. And then when it goes away, they're like, oh, I didn't realize, how kind of detrimental it was for listening to a wall of sound for so long. I hear that over the air too.
Yeah. There's plenty of times when I have driven a long ways home after engineering, like at my stations in Mississippi, and then I'd drive the 5.5 hour, 6 hour drive home, and it'd be 1 o'clock in the morning by the time I got home, and I know I was listening to the radio or my iPod at the time pretty loudly, to try to stay awake and enjoy the music, and you realize that the next morning when you get in the car. And you're, whoa! I had that turned up to 14. Yes. Now there's other people. There are other people who will tell you that, oh, I must have had a lot of weed to smoke because this radio's really loud. I don't know what that's like, but that's what people say. So, wow. Your high frequency enhancement, high frequency distortion, and it used to for so long. We were in a loudness war because your AM station actually got out farther. Your AM station got out farther if you were modulating heavily. That we could show that, especially positive modulation. Your FM station might make, back when we had radios that would punch and come on instantly to the station you punched it to, loudness could make a difference, could make a perceived difference in how people thought of your station. But nowadays, your FM radio is an app on your dashboard, and typically there's a little bit of time. Your brain kind of forgets about how loud the last station was you were listening to when you punch to the new station, and of course it's that way on streaming. There's always going to be a small gap there. So would you agree with me, or do you have a different idea that today's modern technology, especially with the delay when you punch something, whether it's a stream or an FM or an AM station, that kind of mitigates the need for, sounding loud and proud?
Well, I think being loud and proud is also part of the game. But you don't need to go, you don't need all the, super fluffy clippers and everything else. You can get that loudness point, but not all the overly aggressive processing. And of course the mediums are different. You'll process FM separately from, AM, separate from HD, separate from streaming to balance everything out, because you don't want, and I've seen it in many a plants. You walk in and you're like, why do you have the FM processor connected to a stream? And it's like,
Ooh,
well,
no.
it sounds great. And I was like, you might, you got composite clipping in there. It's really, 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 making weird sounds with the encoder because the encoder doesn't know how to handle composite clipping.
Yeah, yeah. Now, speaking of processing, okay, there in your studio room behind you do I see a special edition Orban processor? Is that what that is?
Yes, you do. Yeah, that is a old 8200. I think that's a Orban signature that I have right there. That'll make a good prop for the program today.
Well, were those signed by Bob Orban?
Yeah, that one is. Yes.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, and hey, in my early days in radio, we would refer. I was told to refer to the appendix, not the appendix, the addendum to the Orban manual, because there, Bob Orban and I guess Greg Oganowski also wrote, maintaining quality in the FM plant. Or I think that's the title was something like that. And what a bunch of great basic and some not so basic ideas on keeping the audio sounding good. And this is when we were typically using vinyl as our audio source. We were playing records. Maybe some newer stations had CD players in 1984, 85. But what a great reference to go back to. How about yourself? Where's been your source of learning about audio processing? Because for me, it was Orban manuals back in the 80s. And then later on, along came Frank Foti and his Omnia manuals. How about you?
Well,
what's been your source of learning?
Well, a lot of it, yeah. Well, I messed around with a cutting edge Unity, Unity 2000i. That was one of the first processors really had my hands on and really tweaked around and played with, and read that manual from front to back. And I think one of the blurbs in there with Frank Foti was, when you get it sounding right, walk away, and then listen to it maybe a few hours later or something along those lines. But, sometimes I feel we get into this point where we turn the knobs and listen and, fatigue ourselves. And then we need to kind of step back, let our ears kind of refresh, and then come back in it. And then, and then just walk it in and get it right. That's usually what I do. But you still got to start with a good product to begin with. It's the old Gigo, garbage in, garbage out. If you start with a bad product, the processor really isn't going to help much. So, one of the biggest things that I find now is A to D conversions all over plants that can really make weird things happen to audio and phasing and everything else. And then at the end result, you're trying to tune it out in the processor.
And you're right about that. I've had a lot of experience starting with working with Omnia processors, and then when Axia came along, I got to help a lot of people move into the all digital world, even digital all the way up to and into the audio processor. When those started having either LiveWire or WheatNet or later AES-67, and one thing that I got to explain to a lot of folks is, when you have an audio over IP network, it's possible, if you don't screw it up too much, it's possible that almost the same ones and zeros that came off of the audio file in the automation, except for a level change, a multiplication factor from the audio console, those same ones and zeros go into the audio processor, and the cleanliness is notable. We just moved 8 radio stations on the island of Maui a little over a year ago, and the old place was just distribution amps everywhere and analog wiring everywhere. And on several stations, we didn't change the format. We just moved to a new location, and it was all audio over IP, all the way to the transmitter site. And wow, people would call us and say, "What are you doing? It sounds better." Now we used a different audio processor, but it wasn't aggressive. But I think the main difference was all digital. Not that digital of itself is good. It's good if it's well implemented. Comment on what I've just said about an all digital path.
Yeah. All digital path is definitely the way to go. When I was IT manager in Greensboro, we had a full live wire plant from beginning to end, and it made a big difference over the air. It also was really, really manageable. Now, Atlanta is a lot more complicated than Greensboro because all we had was 4 music brands. Where you're in Atlanta, I have 2 music and two one's sports, one's news talk. So here we have analog, we have AES3, we have AES6, raw AES67, we have Dante and Livewire all living together. So it's been an interesting experience coming into this plant and really trying to wrestle everything together and just point everything, in the right direction. But, so far, one day at a time, but we've made some great strides here. And so far I've converted a lot of stuff over to audio over IP that I can.
Cool. That's interesting that you got several things living together, and the phrase, "Oh my gosh, cats and dogs living together." But no, really, it's German shepherds and Labradors and poodles living together. They're not that different from each other. They're just a little bit different. So.
Yeah, and they all talk, because they all at the end of the day are talking AES 67. So they all work well together. And it works.
I'm not going to ask you to give away any on-air secrets, but maybe you could describe for me, an audio processing path that you like, that you're comfortable with for AM, and what you're comfortable with for FM. And if you don't want to name names or model numbers, that's okay. But I'd like to know what works well for you. What are you liking these days?
What I'm liking these days, for me, it would be Livewire, full-blown Livewire plant, coming into either going out of an Orban, let's say a 5950 or a 5750 or Omni 11 for FM. For AM, it will probably be similar, but with an XPN at the end. That would be my perfect plant.
Gotcha. And how do you, of course, on your news talk and your sports talk stations, what are some of the things that you try to do to assure the best audio quality? I assume you do some live shows, and then you may have some satellite news or long form shows. What do you try to do to keep things sounding, just to make sure that things are implemented well?
Just making sure the board ops are watching levels. Everything is pretty much, everything is pretty much working as it should. Getting rid of weird gain staging. That was one thing that I did. There was a bunch of weird gain staging happening on the back end. So I went in and kind of moved everything back down to 0 dB. And that, cut out a lot of, a board op having to ride the levels all the way up or pulling it all the way down, to try and make, especially if you have multiple hosts coming in off of Comrex, they're, we just, make sure all of them at 0 dB, or 12 o'clock, the classic 12 o'clock, and just, making sure there's no smiley face equalizers or any weird piece of equipment that, somebody thought, well, let's put this in place, and it could have been a stopgate, for another issue. And, just trying to remove layers of gear that may have gotten in place, and it may have been just retired in place, but it's still in line. And if it's an analog piece of equipment that's 20 years old and it has dried up caps, you either have a hum or some random hiss, and, or a channel just dies on you for no reason, usually inconveniently.
Yeah, sure.
So that's what I usually try to do that I see, if I see older gear that's not being used anymore, I just bypass it or pull it out the chain. And usually time that helps out a tremendous amount when it comes to audio quality.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, it's interesting that sometimes the more you pull out, the better it sounds.
Definitely.
That happened, yeah. Hey, we're talking to Ernest Jones. Ernest is the director of technical operations for the Audacy stations in Atlanta, Georgia. Big responsibility in a number 7 market, and man, that's a hot market, I'll tell you. We're going to be back, and when we come back, I'd like to talk to Ernest about using computer technology to kind of maintain your look at everything. If you guys are using any SNMP or any dashboard type systems, if you have any central monitoring, kind of, and again, I realized if Audacy has some company secrets, don't want to know those, but I'm interested in knowing how you keep tabs on lots of stuff going on in all your studios and transmitter sites. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Angry Audio, and there's a new video that has popped up on Facebook that Angry Audio posted. It's actually a clip from this show, from This Week in Radio Tech, about the headphone disconnector, and we've got a little video to watch about it right now, so check this out. As broadcast engineers, we spend a lot of our time connecting things together, but sometimes it's just as important to be able to disconnect something. What am I talking about? This is the Angry Audio disconnector. The disconnector. So here you have something that you just put in series with your headphones, with your Talents headphones. Now, this is available in the 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve size, as you see here. Also available in the 3.5 millimeter size. And you can even mix and match inputs and outputs. The point is, this is what's in the middle. This is the disconnector. So you have a talent that forgets to take their headphones off. They get up, they start to walk away, and boop. Look at that. No more damage to the connectors that you normally use. No more damage to the headphone jack on the audio console or under the furniture. Oh, look, it just went back together, and I wasn't even trying. It's magnetic. It's the disconnector, or the headphone disconnector from Angry Audio. Disconnector. No more broken connectors. Check it out on the web at angryaudio.com. There's a huge amount of things from Angry Audio that you ought to be interested in, and I'm sure if you take a look at them, you will be. You'll find, hey, I need one of those. I need one of those. Check it out at angryaudio.com. Thanks a lot, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is also brought to you by MaxConnect, including the MaxConnect wireless program. And I know this clip is a couple of years old, but it holds true today. We're going to hear for a second from Gary Morrill talking about some why he loves MaxConnect wireless.
When I first spoke with Josh Bone about MaxConnect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using MaxConnect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. It works for us, it'll work for you. MaxConnect.
Gary's right. Hundreds of broadcasters are using MaxConnect wireless 4G LTE modems to get reliable internet data to their transmitter sites and the remote broadcasts. MaxConnect.com. Check it out. And thanks so much to Josh Bone for having the vision and the negotiating skills and the persistence to put this whole thing together. It's a real benefit for broadcasters. Thank you, Josh. This is really something that you can't do for yourself. You can't get for yourself from the cell carriers what MaxConnect has been able to arrange for you, and that is prioritized cellular data and with a fixed IP address. So you can hit that transmitter site. You can also whitelist within the MaxConnect routers. You can whitelist who can access it or what IP address can access it. So that makes you a lot more secure. And of course, VPN is available as well to VPN into these. We just installed a new one out in Hawaii at a AM transmitter site it ain't going to get served by any other service. That's the only way we can get data service out to that transmitter site. Check it out. Thanks a lot, Josh Bone, everybody at MaxConnect. The website is maxconnect.com. I know it's spelled funny. We got a link in the show notes. All right, we're moving on here. We've got Ernest Jones here with us from Atlanta, Georgia. Glad you made the move there, Ernest, and welcome to Atlanta. We'll have to get together sometime. Maybe you can. I guess you're invited to the annual little party they have at the WSB transmitter site. They have a little barbecue out there about once a year. Charles Kenny is there, and plenty of other engineers. Have you hooked up with the SBE chapter in Atlanta yet?
Not yet.
Yeah.
But I have hung out with Charles Kenny over at we share a tower site. WVEE and WSB and SBB also share a tower site. So me and him has hung out there a couple of times so far. So yeah, And yeah, Charles is definitely a good guy. Yeah, I got to see the SB AM site. That's definitely on my list.
Oh yeah, you got to see that. Well, he hasn't. I said bring a fluorescent light with you, but he's got him there. That can be like your Darth Vader lightsaber, because it lights up. It lights up whether you want it to or not. So, yeah. All right. So let's talk about monitoring. As an IT guy, you're probably way more into this than I am. I would love to be skilled at SNMP, and I'm not. I haven't spent enough time with it. My co-host, Chris Tarr, who's often here, Chris is really. I mean, if it's got SNMP, man, he's going to lay down the cash and buy it. Okay. What kind of tools are you liking?
Yeah, our standard here is Burke technology, so we use a lot of that. But yeah, a lot of it does rely on SNMP and IP based remote controls and VoIP based SIP devices for using to make phone calls back, so that the transmitter can call us if something goes on. Long gone are the days of a wall mounted telephone and a sign system speaking very generic messages back to you. So I really love the fact that at a glance I can log into my transmitter and see every single parameter, what it's doing, when it's doing, how it's doing it. It is great, and we have a lot of remote monitoring here that keeps us on our toes and let us know our parameters and what's going on, so that even we don't have to get up in the middle of the night. If we got a transmitter issue, we can glance at it and say, okay, this is what's going on. Do I need to drive out here for that? Maybe not.
The Burke Autopilot, and I have, we have a number of them at our radio stations, but I'm not the guy who installed them. It was my friend Russell Lafferty, who is really the expert at making those things show you everything that you need at a glance. And but I get to use it. I get to dial in or get to the remote screen and see the Burke Autopilot. And I'm it's an interesting, maybe hybrid's the wrong word. It's an interesting coalescence of technologies to take data from the transmitter site. I don't know that we're using any SNMP data, but we're certainly using your traditional samples from various transmitters and control circuits, and to turn that into an IP usable format. This is and this is what a lot of different technologies are doing these days. They're adapting to the whole world of IP transport. Even audio, that's what we were just talking about, Livewire or WheatNet or AES67 or Dante. We're bridging what we need to do in audio with what we can do with IP. I'm wondering if you have any more, being an IT person, you've got insights into IT techniques and technologies that I probably don't realize what's going on. Are there any other technologies around the broadcast facility that you think are pretty cool that you're working with, or anything that you think is on the horizon that you think we ought to be looking out for?
Well, one thing that a lot of broadcasters have been talking about is Starlink, and Starlink will bring you internet connectivity where it doesn't exist. And we had a situation in Greensboro where we needed, internet at one of our transmitter sites. So we went with Starlink. And on a whim, I was curious if I could pump uncompressed audio over a Starlink connection. And absolutely, yes, you can. With now you got to add some forward error correction in there to counter the latency. But we stood it up. We've stood it up multiple days. When the Mosley STL just went bad, and we were sitting there running on Starlink, and it was so clean that we didn't even know it was off until we walked into the TOC and saw that and smelled. We smelled the power supply had burned up.
Oh my goodness!
So. That's when we knew, but over the air, because I was actively listening to the station in my office, and it was the transition was seamless going from the main to the backup STL, and it just held up very nicely running uncompressed audio. So
we're getting ready. We've got a couple of sites in Mississippi that are problematic for getting reliable internet too.
Yeah.
And so on the roof of my house right now is a Starlink, and you can see
Nice.
it pretty much has an unobstructed view of the sky. Again, I'm just playing with it, trying it out, seeing how it works over time, and it seems to be pretty good. Unfortunately, I gotta admit, it's not attached to the roof; it's laying on the roof, and we've had 2 storms that have made it go floop. And that can't be good for the cable that's holding on to it, But it's been fine. I climbed the roof yesterday and set it back upright.
Yeah, I still think the funny thing that when we set up the Starlink at our tower site, it showed the one obstruction, which was a tower, 1,000-foot tower, and I'm like, there's no way we can move around this obstruction. So, but other than that, it's so minor in the footprint of the dish that it didn't affect the signal at all.
You'd have to get the dish, the panel, a mile away before the 1,000-foot tower quit having any effect on it whatsoever. I was a little surprised. I've got I'm not showing any red dots here, but there actually is a chimney that's a little bit in the way. And if this went a little farther down to the southwest, the northwest, right there. Once in a while, I see a little red dot there where I know it's the chimney that's in the way. But that's all blue. That's pretty cool. And I know there's Starlink. There's an enterprise version of Starlink. Of course, there's different packages that you can get. I know that there's a very, very large broadcaster who has done a lot of testing with Starlink, and they do notice a pretty fair number of dropouts that are a second, typically 1 second or less. And then they do push updates to the receiver and the router, and that'll take you down for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, something like that. But they try to do that, literally at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, sort of thing. So,
it doesn't hurt to have some redundancy, and one of my contract stations use a Max Connect system as a backup STL. So and that was very good. That system just works and works. We have no complaint. They had no complaints over Max Connect.
In fact, I mentioned we just put a Max Connect in, and we could have put an AT&T 4G, 5G router that's on the FirstNet network. So it's got better guarantees, and you can get a fixed IP address. But to get the fixed IP address, you've got to talk to AT&T for a long time to support. To get that done.
Yeah, they fight you on fixed IPs.
It is not easy to get done, and then you come out of it, and you got to put it in the IP pass-through mode, and then still provide your own router. And again, this is not another commercial for Max Connect, but I told my business partner Larry, I said, Larry, if we just put Max Connect there, we have a fixed IP. We can do a port forward where you need to. We can restrict it on a whitelist, and it has built-in Wi-Fi and a wired connection. It's got everything we need. We don't have to do anything else, and we can put the Wise cams on there, which are Wi-Fi only. We can put the Burk on there, which needs the port forward. So we're covered. If we just do the one Max Connect, we don't have to juggle 3 other items. So anyway, that's what we did. All right. Well, good to know that you guys are really doing the Burk thing. Do you have any other monitoring systems that you can talk about, or that seem cool to you?
Everything else is pretty straightforward when it comes to typical monitoring systems. Like I said, we have the Burk autopilots, and then of course telephone based calling and stuff like that. So. And then we have a national monitoring for that, that monitors all of our radio stations to make sure everything is up and going, and and also having some good support there. We have a very good support system here. All of us talk to each other and make sure all the stations are up. And me being in here for 4 years, I'm learning something new every day. Is very, very much true.
Good deal. We are talking to Ernest Jones. He's the new director of technical operations. And hey, tell you what, when we're going to do our last break here, and when we come back, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that video that you put on Facebook with the old AM transmitter. And then I'm going to hit you up, see if you can come up with a tip of the week for other engineers, whether they're new engineers or maybe old guys like me who have just missed something that you have become aware of. You'd like to point us to something useful. That would be great for a tip of the week. But you got 2 minutes to think about it. So you got your homework set out for you. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Innovonics. You know, they make a lot of cool stuff that we use at our radio stations. And one of those is the Sophia HD radio site streamer. Love this thing. We remote into it every few days or so. Want to check on one of the HD stations or one of the FM stations. We can remotely tune it. We can make sure that RDS metadata is being transmitted and received. We can get some statistics about that. Also, the PAD or PAD, or I think now they call it PSD metadata for our HD stations. Love this thing. So the Sophia 568. Some of the other features of the Sophia 568, it has a built-in band scanner display. It displays a spectrum plot of the whole FM band or a section that you choose. You don't have to look at the whole FM band. And it identifies HD radio transmissions. It gives you local and remote readout of all your pertinent metadata, like I was just talking about. There's a front panel setup, and that's easy to do. It's a beautiful OLED display. It's a beautiful front panel setup using a jog wheel control. It's actually intuitive. It's good to use, but you can also do all that with the web interface, and it's quick with the web interface as well. It stays on channel and on mode, even when you have signal loss or even power loss. So if your power goes out, power comes back on, it's tuned to the same station where you left it on. It does not auto blend between FM and HD like a consumer radio, and that's by choice. It has front panel alarms or rear panel tallies, that is contact closures, to indicate audio loss, low signal, RDS errors, and HD reception loss. And here's something useful. You got an HD station? Well, it has a split mode for audio monitoring that lets you listen to FM in one ear and HD1 in the other ear. So it really aids your setup for diversity delay. It's super intuitive and easy to dial that delay in just right. And firmware updates are no charge. It has SNMP. That is fully supported. And the real-time clock in it has a battery backup. Lots more features to check out. You should go to the website at innovonicsbroadcast.com, innovonicsbroadcast.com. And I'm talking about the Model 568. It's the HD radio site streamer. And where can you get yours? Well, of course, from Broadcaster's General Store, where they have not only Innovonics processors and tuners and all that stuff, they have sharp pencils. That means you're going to get a very good deal from Broadcaster's General Store. I'm usually a little bit surprised by, I see the list price, and then they show you your price, and it's usually quite agreeable. But check it out from Broadcaster's General Store. The website is bgs.cc. bgs.cc. Thanks a lot, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Ernest Jones from Atlanta, is our guest. And Ernest, going to hit you up for, let's see, what did we say? Not only a tip of the week, but did I ask for something else? I forget now.
I think it's the video that I posted to Facebook.
Oh, yes, the video. Ago. Yeah, so what was your inspiration for giving us a little walking tour of this old transmitter?
Well, this it's kind of full circle, because this radio station was the first place I started at back in I believe about 1999 or 2000, and you could say things became full circle because back in late 2024, I had the opportunity to purchase said radio station. So me and some partners got together and we purchased this radio station in a small town called Audacy, North Carolina, and so it had this old RCA BTA 1R1 transmitter that had been there since 1968. And I learned a lot working on tube transmitters because of this. sourcing tubes and it had a bunch of issues when we got a hold of the radio station. The transmitter was barely making power. All the tubes were extremely soft. It had the crystals were bad. There was the Pi network was way out of tune. The ATU was out of tune. So over the past year, just going through repairing, getting it back to where it needs to be. Then we got enough finances to buy a BEAM1A, and this past week I drove from Atlanta down to Ahoskie and spent the whole weekend installing that AM1A, including the fact that it was probably the coldest it had ever been down there in decades. So I was out there in 21-degree weather, snowing, pulling new coax into the ATU to cut over to the AM1A, and we got it on the air Friday night, Saturday morning. We got the AM1A on the air.
Huh. Nice. Wow. Hey, thanks to Suncast for. I should have sent you a link to that video, but you found it quick. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
All right.
And Linda had been there. She's been at the radio station since '68. So I thought it was great for her to do the final shutdown of that transmitter.
Oh, I saw where she did that.
She has been there for a long time. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Mm-hmm. What a good story. And how good of you to go take care of that. That's really great. All right.
Yeah.
Looking for a tip of the week. What wizened advice can you send us away with?
Okay. I like a lot of times it's trial by fire. So, trace your cable before you unplug it.
Oh,
and there's a story behind that.
I'm sure there is.
When I got down. Yeah. So when I got down to Atlanta and got the DTO position, I had to come in on a Sunday because we had an NFL and an NBA game, doubleheader. So we had to reconfigure some studios. So while I was there just waiting around, I went into the TOC, our tech room, and just started, I'm just clean up, picked up a broom, started sweeping and, looking around. And I was like, well, let me look at this cable that's draped across the front of the rack and going over to a switch. And I said, well, can't be that bad. So I unplugged it. And as I'm pulling the cable up out of the rack and around, all my stations go silent. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Of course they do. Of course.
So I plug it back in and I start looking at all my STLs and all of them drop the network connection. And that's when I realized this one cable was a trunk line to my network switch that fed my STLs. So, for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then had some people come by and say, "Hey, the station's off there." I said, "Yeah, I know. Everything is coming back up." So, yeah, that's my tip of the day is trace your cable before you unplug it because it might look ominous, but it might have something critical on it.
And if you back that up a little bit, you might also say, I would add to that tip by saying, don't make one of the most important cables in the building something that's in the way.
Yeah.
don't make it attractive to move or
it was definitely attractive to move. Yeah. A week later, I rewired the STL so that they were not going through that trunk line. So that fixed that problem.
Good. All right. Well, we got to go. Ernest, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate getting to know you for this hour. And I look forward to seeing you next time I get down to Atlanta, maybe Georgia Broadcasters or something like that, or certainly for the little cookout that they do at WSB. And maybe get involved with SBE there in Atlanta, and I'll get to come see you and everybody else there then. So thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. I'll send you links to the show. Yeah, happy to have you on, and thanks for posting that video that caught my eye. Ernest Jones, Director of Technical Operations for Audacy Stations in Atlanta, has been our guest. We got to go. We got a great show next week with David B. Alec, and also Fred is going to be here as well on that show. Let's see, it's going to be. Let me see if I can get that information pulled up here. Fred Willard and David Bialik are going to be with us talking about the SBE NS workshop and some of the interesting topics that they've arranged to do this year at the NAB show. We might also have a quick segment from the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, which is starting next week on Tuesday here in Nashville. Until then, thanks a lot to Suncast for producing the show. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.